mostly what we're doing now is helping people figure out how they can comply with laws that just don't make sense. I mean, Virginia law incorporates federal law by reference, but federal law has a different standard. So it becomes it's not only incongruent, I would describe it as vague, ambiguous, overbroad, and unconstitutional.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, as the tagline of this show is, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Tyson Daniel, who runs an eponymous law firm that bears his name, but is also the guy in charge of VirginiaCannabisLawyers.com. How are you doing today, Tyson?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. We have already had quite the discussion just in the pre-roll. My pre-roll doesn't usually go for about 20 minutes, but we've just kind of been talking nonstop. And I was like, I need to hurry up and get recorded because you keep telling me all these really cool things. So we're going to have, I think we're going to have a good conversation. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and take a look. This is Tyson's website, and it's really easy to remember. It is VirginiaCannabisLawyers.com. I used to live right up there in Northern Virginia, a little town called Front Royal for a couple of years. So
That's
I'm
what
very
we call Nova, right?
Yeah, Nova, Northern Virginia. I definitely lived up there and then would drive in through into DC. I was told it was about a 40-minute drive every day. It was not a 40-minute drive. It was an hour and a half on a good day. And we would definitely spend a lot of time stuck in traffic, but that's life. Anyway, so this is his website. They are about the cannabis business, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. And you can actually book consultations by visiting VirginiaCannabisLawyers.com, and you can book a conversation right there. We'll talk about that whole process. You can also give them a call. You know what stuck it out to me? I'd forgotten the 540 area code, but that's what we had back then. Like 540, I know that. Oh yeah, that's where we used to live. So 540-427-7143. And again, that is VirginiaCannabisLawyers.com. We will, as always, have a link down below in the description to Tyson's areas. He does also do a little bit of criminal law, personal defense, and et cetera. That's the Daniel Law Firm PC.com. But I think he's mostly interested in talking about the cannabis stuff. And again, we've only had a couple guests ever to talk about cannabis law, so I'm actually really kind of intrigued to see where this goes. Before we get started, as always, we are going to read from our sponsors, and our first sponsor today is SearchSift. Do you know why some legal clicks cost $100, $200, or even $500 or more in Google? It's not because Google has a magical make lawyers expensive button. It's because Google Ads is an auction. When 5 or 10 or 20 law firms or roofers or plumbers are all bidding on the same high intent search terms, car accident lawyer near me or roofer near me, etc., the price goes up and up and up. And that's where most people wind up missing out. Before someone ever clicks an ad, before they ever see the map pack, they choose a law firm. Google's already shaping the search with autocomplete suggestions, and that's where SearchSift comes in. SearchSift helps position your firm or your business in the search journey early, before the predictive search that people see before they make their decision. So instead of fighting only after the search has happened, you're influencing search before it ever gets started. And you only pay when somebody actually clicks and goes to your website, which is really neat. Please visit SearchSift, that's SYFT, searchsift.com to book a time and speak with a specialist about getting your firm or your business into the auto suggestion. Again, there is no cost at all, other than it's a pay-per-click model, so there's nothing to lose. If they don't perform, you don't pay, which is kind of neat. That's searchsift.com, and again, we'll have links to our sponsors down below. Our second sponsor today is Rank with News. When somebody Googles you or your company, what do they actually see? Is it just your website, or do they see real credibility, trust, and authority? Because the businesses getting chosen today aren't just visible, they're validated. And that's where Rank with News comes in. Rank with News helps feature you, your business, your firm in major media outlets like Business Insider, Yahoo News, AP News, and more. So when prospects look you up, they don't just find you, they trust you. This isn't about running more ads, it's about owning your reputation at the exact moment that it matters. Visit rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist. All righty.
Cool sponsors.
What's that?
I said cool sponsors.
Yeah, I like them. It keeps the lights on too, right? That's always good. So let me kill my screen share here. Go away. There we go. And we're going to jump back over here. All right. So again, I am meeting with Tyson Daniel today. M. Tyson Daniel. I saw the M period. I was like, is it Mike? It's not. It's Mark, unfortunately. But I was like, oh, am I meeting with Mike Tyson? M.
Right,
Tyson
but
Daniel.
yeah,
Tyson Daniels, who is the brains.
distantly related, I would say.
Yes, well, I mean, you trace us all back, right?
That's
Somewhere,
right.
somewhere far enough back, we're all related. Well, Tyson is the founder of Virginia Cannabis Lawyers. He has practiced law in Virginia for more than 2 decades, beginning as a trial lawyer, handling criminal defense, personal injury, and other litigation matters before becoming one of the Commonwealth's leading voices in cannabis law. Today, he helps entrepreneurs, investors, and business owners navigate one of the most heavily regulated and rapidly changing industries in America, an industry where business law, criminal law, regulatory compliance, local law, national law, politics, and entrepreneurship all collide. That's a mouthful right there, and I'm sure I barely even scratched the surface. So my very first question, Tyson, to you is just this. What did I miss? Tell me about you. What are your hobbies? What are your interests? What are your passions? What boards are you a member of? What makes you tick?
Okay. Well, I'll say the first thing is that we could tie cannabis to every other area of practice of law. And I'll come back to that later. But in direct response to your first question, what you missed is that every vertical in the law has some connection to cannabis. Um, Sometimes it's more obvious than other times, but I've had this conversation with different members of educational boards, whether it's the Virginia Trial Lawyers Association or let's see, I think I spoke with the State Bar about it as well. So first off, on what you missed, not much, good job, but just a quick addition to that. Because really the applications, and we're not just talking about intoxicating cannabis, we're talking about all of the finished products that come from hemp. We are limited only by our creativity as to what we can do with this plant. Um, Now, what gets me going? I am, well, I'm much nerdier than I used to be, much more of a nerd than I used to be. I'm the youngest of six. My father was a retired Ranger Colonel. Um, I'm very, very close with my five older siblings, four brothers and one sister. Um, Reminded constantly I'm the post-Vietnam mistake, so there's 8 years between us and them. And I think that helped shape my character, with a family that, was no nonsense. We moved around a lot. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, moved to Germany, lived there until I was around 6, moved back to the States, um, and then moved around here in the States, settled in Richmond in the early 80s, went to uh, high school and, well, middle school and high school there. Um, my father used to tell me you can go anywhere you want, but I'll pay for VMI. So I went to Roanoke College to play lacrosse, was uninvited to return after my first semester for really just not going to class. And I think that later, when a bunch of friends found out I became a lawyer, they were a little bit head scratching about that. But in any event, I got myself together, ended up finishing at VCU in '95 on the 7-year college plan. The law was not on my radar. I realized that going into the real work world, that I wanted to do something else. My oldest brother is a forensic pathologist. He and I had helped him do some work with some of the cases that he had as an expert witness, and that's what got me interested in the law. So in '96, I applied to law school. I was waitlisted at U of R. I went off my first year to New England, Western New England College of Law, spent a year there, and then transferred back to U of R. Finished there in '99 and then went off to the public defender's office. So I'm married. I have one child who just turned 18. Just had my 29th wedding anniversary yesterday.
Awesome.
Uh, Thank you. And of course, it'd been nice to have taken Monday off and done something more, but such is the life of a
I mean, this
cannabis.
was just 29, right? Just make sure 30 is covered.
That's exactly right. And I was gonna say, but such is the life of a cannabis lawyer in a state where a governor who had been supportive of a recreational cannabis bill just vetoed it. So we just, as you might imagine, took a rather significant financial hit by not signing up the at least 50 clients that we had to seek licensing. So, but that's okay. I had planned in anticipation of a veto uh, that there were other streams of revenue, um, particularly all the people who now are going to be at risk of prosecution for um, uh, for acting outside of the hemp rubric here in the state, which is starting to get cracked down on in a pretty big way. So looks like I'm going back to trial work here soon.
Well, on a related note, give me a pitch for your firm because you're kind of dancing around a little bit. I think we understand you do cannabis law, but what do you really do? Like, how many aspects of cannabis law are there? What do you focus on? What are you known for? Why do people choose to work with you, Tyson?
Well, so we do licensing where licensing is available. It looked like it was going to be available here starting very soon, by July 1st or maybe even earlier. Uh, since that is not an issue or an option for folks right now, what we really help them do is stay in compliance with what are hopelessly conflicting state and federal regulations. And the feds really haven't been enforcing marijuana laws. The USDA waived the preemption on the hemp program, so states are allowed to develop their own hemp programs and have more restrictive definitions of hemp under state law than under federal law. What's been very interesting, however, is that the DOJ did not waive preemption on the definition of marijuana, and many states have also changed the definition of marijuana to include a total THC rubric, which also recently happened in the budget bill that was passed last November, but will not take effect in Congress until November 12th of this year. Um, and so there's a fair amount of pushback. We'll see what happens on the federal level, but mostly what we're doing now is helping people figure out how they can comply with laws that just don't make sense. I mean, Virginia law incorporates federal law by reference, but federal law has a different standard. So it becomes it's not only incongruent, I would describe it as vague, ambiguous, overbroad, and unconstitutional. So those are some of the things I'm working on today, actually. So for upcoming trials regarding motions to dismiss based on constitutional challenges.
So it's enough to keep you busy and keep you out of trouble at the very least.
Yeah, keep me out of trouble and not getting as much sleep as I hope.
Well, you kind of dance around this one too, but I'm going to ask you this question. What got you into law? Were you always a kid that kind of looked at law? Did you grow up watching, I don't know, Perry
Nope,
Mason?
nope.
Or did you just kind of stumble into it after college didn't quite go the way you were expecting? What was the process that led you there? And then what
Yeah,
led you particularly into cannabis law?
yeah. Well, okay, so those are two different stories. But the first one is, I had been a wild kid. Um, my father was a Ranger colonel, inducted into the U.S. Army Ranger Hall of Fame. So, so maybe that was part of rebelling from him, um, but he was good. I had good parents. But I had really international business was what I was really interested in. But I didn't have, um, I didn't feel like I had the ability or the connections to get into. So, as I mentioned, my oldest brother's a doctor and a lawyer, and he's a forensic pathologist. So he had been working as a defense witness in criminal cases in very serious, mostly homicide cases. In fact, most of those were shaken baby cases, or then became abusive head trauma and changed, you know, names several times. And so he was one of the world's really leading experts on that. And so working with him in helping put the files together, organize, um, the evidence that he needed to review, needed my help on reviewing some of it. We happened to live next door to each other. And so uh, I think that's what really got me interested. And then it was really going into real life, working a real job and saying, but I'd rather go use my brain in a way that I think I can, I think I can actually help people as opposed to, I think I was doing credit card collections at the time. So, um,
Not
uh,
quite as meaningful work.
well, I mean, I'd say to the credit card companies, it certainly is, right? And no bust on people doing that gig. I just um, I was interested in getting into something where I thought maybe I could, well, one, I could do what I thought I was good at, which was trial work. I was quick on my feet, kind of a smart aleck, and enjoyed arguing, but as an intellectually honest person. I grew up in a very strict Catholic family. And so, uh, maybe that cuts both ways. I'm recovering now, I suppose. But in any event, um, I think that's what drove me into the law, and the idea that if I wasn't going to do trial work, it would lead me to international business. Because when I was in college, I was also a language major. Um, I was a French, Spanish, and German major initially, and then I ended up finishing as an English major, which is a little bit embarrassing. But I have an interest in language, and I love to read. So
Gotcha.
maybe
Okay.
that was part of it too.
That's what led you down that path. So, well, let me ask you a couple of quick questions.
Well, and now let me say this: I had an experience in high school. I don't know if this led me to the law initially. I think it led me away from. I had, and this is a sad story. Um, I had two good friends of mine that were killed in a car accident, after having been hit by head on by two other people, two other people in my high school class. So, and I testified as a witness in the manslaughter case when I was 18, and involving that car accident. And I had just been dropped off shortly before it happened. And turns out, much to my surprise later in life, that it's the seminal accident reconstruction case in Virginia still today. So um, that once I got into law school and I started to understand the different areas of practice, that experience, I think, really helped shape the direction of where I wanted to go.
Gotcha.
So,
Very cool. Um, that was that was peeking one or two other thoughts I was thinking about, but I'll try and rein those in. If I'm not careful, I'm the type of guy, and I think you might be very similar to me. I like to think via tangents, and all of a sudden a tangent leads to a tangent, leads to a tangent. So, well, let me ask you this kind of a simple question. We're about 6 years out now from 2020, and that was a really weird year for a lot of people. I haven't talked to a lot of attorneys in Virginia, particularly in this particular the word of the day is apparently particular in the niche that you serve in cannabis law. What did anything change because of the pandemic for you, for your practice, for your clients? Um, and if so, what? Was it for the better, for the worse? Did it streamline things? Did you have clients shutting things down? Was it were dispensaries, if they have those in Virginia, or because it's not recreational, do they not? Were those considered what was the word? Non-closed downable businesses, whatever the word was.
Essential.
Essential businesses, right?
Yeah.
So what was your experience during the pandemic?
Well, it's a wonderful question. I my experience was I was still doing capital cases. Um, I had a federal death penalty case that was set for 7 weeks in October of 2019. We settled it about 3 weeks into it. Huge case, 18 co-defendants. It was a zoo. Um, COVID was just coming on about that time. We were in court every day, all day, and it was a very serious case. So, there was a lot going on that I think the group of us, until we got out of that trial, didn't really know too much about. I had a state capital case coming on right behind that. So I had to move kind of right into that. So really wasn't until late 2019, early 2020 that it got on my radar. Now, it just so happens that I'm I'm a business-minded lawyer, and I have a company that makes hypochlorous acid, and that's HOCl. We make it with potassium sodium, potassium chloride, which is a potassium-based salt that's good for plants. I knew that moving into Virginia cannabis stores, which I knew I was going to open, and really try to remove myself from the court, because I just didn't feel like there was anything intellectually honest about wearing a mask part of the time, not wearing a mask part of the time, being 6 feet apart. My oldest brother's a doctor, as I mentioned a couple of times. I sold 16,000 masks in one day because I'd set up the apparel company in China. And so I had all these connections with overseas sourcing. And he said to me, well, T, they don't work. And I said, what do you mean, Jack? And he said, well, I mean, be like using a chain link fence to stop a BB. And I said, oh, well, I guess I won't sell any more of those. So I really moved my practice hardcore into the cannabis world. I strongly that, and of course, this is all still being studied, but that cannabis it can and should be used as a treatment for ailments that are either long COVID or in some cases, I think that there were some vaccine injuries. And so I the whole time, the day March 13th, 2020, the day everything shut down, I was actually at a meeting with about 50 farmers telling them not to sign a contract that was going to burn them for growing hemp that was really disguised as a seed sale. So, I just sort of kept on, but I really took myself out of the courtroom because I had a hard time with that, arguing facts when we couldn't see people's facial expressions, which is an incredibly important part of cross-examination or direct examination or for the judge or trier of fact jury. You have to be able to see somebody's facial expression. And so I just didn't feel like I could do the job as a criminal defense lawyer or any trial lawyer that I needed to do. So that was really the thing that pushed me out into Virginia cannabis lawyers with full gusto.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so you've been practicing law for a while now. Um, I had said in my intro 20 years. I feel like it was a little longer than that. Am I crazy, or is it?
Yeah, no, it's been 20. I graduated, well, I was licensed in December of 99. I graduated in May of 99, took the bar in July, got my results in October, sworn in November, started practice in December.
Good.
Yeah,
Well, you're coming up on a big anniversary there,
yeah.
and happy anniversary to you and your wife as well. Obviously, people
Thank
don't
you.
know this, but that was yesterday. I know this because of our pre-roll discussion. So, sounds like you got married, and a couple years later, graduated law school. Getting the timeline right here, which is good.
Yeah, graduated the junior my excuse me my second year of law school of 3 years of law school, so it's my second year.
Gotcha. Well, I'm a firm believer that in 25 years, it's a quarter of a century. It's a long time honing a craft. I'm sure you're probably really good at what you do, but you step up to bat enough times, nobody bats 1,000, as they say. So I'm sure that you've had a few moments in your legal career, Tyson, where you failed or you suffered what you felt was a failure. And maybe it wasn't even on you. Maybe it was you had a witness who said the wrong thing. Maybe a judge just decided something out of the blue. Maybe, whatever it is. But what's one or two of the times in your legal career where you suffered a failure, a setback, but what did you learn from that? And how do you carry that forward to always make sure you're bringing your A game and representing your clients as best as possible?
Well, there are several. I can think of a case that I had, I want to say in the mid 2000s, where I had a fellow charged with discharging a firearm within the curtilage of his property or discharging a firearm within the city limits. Well, it turns out that the law, that code section, the way it was written that year, I think there was an amendment, which had to do with felons in possession of firearm, um, discharging a firearm, much less even holding a firearm. Except there was a comma that had been misplaced in the code section. Um, Now I caught that comma, and the way that it changed the definition was was to exclude my client because he was within the curtilage of his property, and he was even though he had been a felon, the way that the statute read, it it would allow felons to do that. Now, obviously, that was not the intent of the legislature. And after battling the court judge who's now passed, who I thought the world of, and a prosecutor who was my arch nemesis at the time, but who I know to be uh, a very good prosecutor and sometimes reasonable. Um, we went around and around the mulberry bush, and I'll never forget the judge saying to me that, well, Mr. Daniel, I've done some research, and despite your arguments that the errata needs to come out first, correcting the code section, the acts of assembly, when they take effect, are actually the law of the Commonwealth. And this had to do with the timing of the offense versus the timing of the statute with the wrong comma in it. And so I learned the hard way. In fact, that I don't know that many lawyers even know today, which is that the Virginia Acts of Assembly, um, not the printed code books that we get after July 1st, are actually the law of Virginia. So that was a difficult lesson. Um, I'd say uh, and take away and be able to use that later. That's been very helpful to know that in subsequent arguments. Um, I think that there are incidents day to day, particularly when I was a public defender, where you just felt like you could never beat the man, you know. Um, and I will say that one of the reasons I try to stay in state court as opposed to federal court is because I like to win every now and statistically that doesn't happen in federal. Uh, so uh, I think there's probably another one or two that I could come up with, but for the sake of keeping things moving and keeping the vibe. Um, Give me another one, and I'm sure something else will pop up.
No, that's fine. Well, the flip side of that question is, what's something in your legal practice you're particularly proud of? What's one of the biggest successes of your career, or something that the proverbial feather in the cap, so to
That's
speak?
an easy one. I would say that, well, the first one is much more intense, and it had to do with a client of ours who's charged with capital murder, very bad record. He was able to testify despite his record, and ultimately was acquitted. Um, One of the most difficult things about doing capital murder cases are not the are the cases where you know or you have real reason to believe that the individual is innocent, is not guilty. Um, that I mean that's really that's heavy medicine. And so when that happened, when the jury was out, I remember saying to my friend, my boss, if the jury comes back and walks this guy, meaning acquits him, I'm not going back to the office. What? And he looked at me and I said, I don't. What more can I do with my legal? Well, that was short-sighted because there's a lot more I could do coming back later. But it he was acquitted, and it was about a year and a half before I went back and got my stuff. Now it was cool. We were all friends. We've been through a lot together. Um, Plus, I had some cool stuff at the office that they wanted to keep anyway. So I'd say that's been the case that I'm proudest of. Um, at the same time, there there are cases that I just had recently where my clients, I don't know the outcome yet, but the family of my clients called and wrote some really, really nice things. And, I think um, if people get the opportunity, particularly for public defenders, um, just to thank them or teachers, um, just to thank them randomly for what they do, it's meaningful, because it's so oft not said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kind of
So,
unsung heroes.
didn't mean to get too sappy on you there or anything.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, it's a good concept. Okay, so let's take a step towards absurdity because in the pre-roll we talked a little bit. One of my favorite questions is what's one of the most absurd things you've encountered? You just kind of laughed and said, "I've got a couple." And one of the things I'm supposed to remind you to talk about is artificial insemination and pleading the fifth. So tell me one or two of your best absurd stories because those are always, I think, the best part of the podcast. Well, maybe not always, but they're quite often listeners' favorites. So
Well,
what's
I'll try to give you at least two and maybe a third sort of timeline wise. So, well, actually three. Pre, so this would have been pre 9/11, 2000. I'm standing in court in Roanoke City, General District Court, which is where we have traffics and misdemeanor cases and preliminary hearings on felonies. And there's, I think this was a Friday morning, the place was absolutely packed. And um, the judge usually calls the guilty plea line first. So to kind of clear out. Right up at their very front is a fellow that jumps up, and I think, he's got a camping, pack on. He's got pans and so everything the guy owns is on his back. And the judge court passes the name over, and the judge says, "Mr. So and so, why did you fail to appear in court on such and such date?" And first case of the day, huge guilty plea line, standing room only. And everybody's sort of waiting with bated breath as to what this guy's going to say, because it's going to set the mood for the day. Uh, and the guy says, he just looks up, then looks down, shakes his head, says, "Judge, I got no good lie to tell you." And there's this pause, and then the judge erupted laughing, with laughter. And then, of course, that gave the whole courtroom the opportunity to laugh. Um, and it was one of those beautiful days in district court where nobody went to jail. We worked through that docket incredibly quickly, and it was just the bit of candor. We can be honest with each other without being candid. And candor is what people need, and candor is what we must provide the court. And so that little nugget of truth, I think he probably helped a bunch of people from staying out of jail that weekend. uh, let's see, I'd say during the COVID period, um, well, actually, right after 9/11, not the I tried a jury on September 12th, 2001. Bad day to try a jury trial. Um, Obviously, the Twin Towers had fallen the night before.
Yeah.
Uh, the judge had and the prosecutor had both said, "Look, the jury doesn't want to be here today. Nobody wants to be here today." My client, however, was absolutely insistent on having his day in court. I, I don't know if it was a felony DUI case. Um, and I don't know if he was, intoxicated at the time that morning or not, but um, we ended up getting the case struck to a misdemeanor, and so it was going to be a jury trial of seven. Well, those seven people didn't want to be there either, and so I stood up at opening statement, and it just came out of my mouth completely by accident. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, my client sits here today presumed guilty." And it just broke the ice. Everybody started busting out laughing. Later, the judge called me back and said, because it was absolutely true. On September 12th, 2001, you know, I mean, uh, I think most people just wanted to get in and get out. They had no patience for somebody with third offense DUI struck to a second offense. It was a misdemeanor. So in any event, the guy had been offered 8 days in jail, time served on a misdemeanor. He rejected it, and the jury, after the testimony was presented, walked into the jury room. I don't think they sat down. They must have just stood outside the door and just nodded heads. They walked right back in, sat down, and gave him 12 months in jail after he turned down, 8 days. So that was another one. It's not so funny, but that was during that trial. The guy got off the stand, took his teeth out, um, as if to show that was why he was slurring or something like that. It was a disaster, um, as you might could expect, with no one able to prepare the night before, just riveted to the TV all night.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, absolutely.
so and then I suppose more recently during COVID, and this is one of the times where I was glad that we had masks on. I had a woman who uh, had a charge. She was a victim in a case. It was a domestic matter. She did not want to testify, of course. The Commonwealth wanted to force her to testify. And so I tried to explain to her that you can't just say five, fifth. You can't do the Dave Chappelle, pleading the fifth, kind of thing. You have to say the magic words, which is I plead the Fifth Amendment. I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, which she just could not get. The sweet lady. I'm in Roanoke, Middle Appalachians. Um, you know, Probably hadn't had the best schooling, but just could not get incrimination. So I write out on this little strip of legal pad what she has to say, and then I say, okay, look, you can keep this, but do not pull it out of your sleeve or your pocket and then start reading it when you're on the stand, because they won't let you do that. And of course, she gets on the stand. What does she do? She pulls it out, starts to read it. The prosecutor objects. The judge says, "Ma'am, you can't do that." And I said, "Judge, well, can I give her a head start on it?" He says, "Yes, Mr. Daniel, please do." And so I said, "Ma'am, we're going to go through the magic words, and I can only give you a head start. So I assert my fifth," and then she goes, "Oh, I got it. My Fifth Amendment privilege against self-insemination." And there's this huge guffaw immediately, and it was almost cartoon-esque when I looked up at the bench and the dais, and the judge's mask was like one of those horns that blows off, in a cartoon.
Like a
Uh,
Tex Avery cartoon or something, old Bugs Bunny.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, I love that guy. Country Wolf and City Wolf, right?
Yeah,
Um, uh, and so, like with the eyes, yeah. Um, and he wheels around, bends over, and all you can see is the back of his robe as he goes down out into chambers because he's laughing so hard. The clerk has bowled over laughing so hard. The the prosecutor and the victim witness coordinator and that whole team are, just beside themselves. And the poor, witness, who is my client's mother, um, was just sitting there like, what I say. So uh, anyway, hopefully I didn't ruin that by telling too much of it.
no, I mean, I was curious to see where it was going to go, and I had no idea what artificial insemination in the fifth, and I didn't go to self-incrimination, so that would make sense. Like I was honestly trying to figure out how lurid this story was going to get. A lot less lurid than I was a little apprehensive that it could get, but that's
Well,
okay.
it worked out really well. The judge accepted her effort. The prosecution did not object further, and the case was dismissed. So,
Very good. Well, Tyson, I want to ask you a couple questions about cannabis law. I do want to point out, just for the sake of timekeeping, it is going on 5 o'clock your time right now. I don't know what your hard stop looks like, but I do want to ask you a few questions about your cannabis practice, if that's
sure.
okay. What does your actual hard stop look like for the sake of this podcast?
About 15, maybe.
About 15 minutes or so. Okay. So in that case, let me ask maybe just one of the most important questions, and that's this. So if somebody called you tomorrow and they wanted to start a cannabis business, first off, what steps should they take to work with you, and what are the first things you would want them to understand?
Um, well, first of all, we are very selective in the clients that we take. Not because we're so cool or anything like that. It's really because we we want to make sure that the clients that we accept, just like the clients want to make sure that when they vet us, we know what we are doing. We want to make sure that we're bringing on clients that we can actually help, that that have enough bandwidth, both in experience, depth and breadth of experience, um, financing, industry acumen, um, experience is good, but certainly acumen. Um, a prior business history, not in cannabis, because those people coming from the legacy market for the most part have never had to complete a balance sheet, or they've never had to read an income statement. Um, they don't know some of the real fundamentals of accounting, not because, you know, that's a bust, as it is just a fact, 'cause they didn't have to do it. You know, reporting issues, banking issues. So we want to know what their level of experience is, because it's going to tell us how much time we're going to have to take, not only educating them about the laws, but building their network. Because that's the other thing that we have here that is extremely valuable, which is our network of connections. Um, and so if somebody wanted to get in touch with the CEO of Cookies or something like that, we have the kind of contacts that can get those people connected. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to work out. In fact, usually that kind of stuff, as just a matter of stats, doesn't. But we want to know what their experience level is. They want to know what ours is, of course. Um, for me to suggest that as a Virginia lawyer that my experience in cannabis is um, greater than that from a lawyer in cannabis from California is absurd. Uh, I will say that I've been a lifetime member of Normal, so um, I was working on these issues when they were criminal defense issues long before any of this legalization stuff came up, except maybe in California. The Pot Brothers at Law, for example, I don't know if you know them, but they're good
Sure.
friends of mine. And so Mark and Craig, we were referring cases back and forth to each other before legalization was even on the radar anywhere back east. So I think that did that properly answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And if somebody wanted to work with you, the best way to do that would be to visit virginiacannabislawyers.com and fill out the form, book a paid consultation. What's the process look like?
Fill out the form, and or you can call that number. I have a wonderful intake process. I've got great staff. Um, our network here of lawyers is really not a bunch of in-house lawyers. It's lawyers. I'm a strong believer that people need local counsel where they are. So even though I'm in Roanoke, Virginia, and I know, you know, many of the jurisdictions all around the state from my different types of practice, um, I think it's reckless for lawyers, or at least me, to bring on a client in the Northern Neck and and let's say uh, oh gosh, what's up there? Chincoteague, you know, where I could it'd take me 7 hours to get there by drive, and I don't know the power players in Chincoteague. You know,
Yeah.
I doubt there are that many, but there are some. There are a couple probably, and I'd say they start with the Commonwealth Attorney and the sheriff, and maybe the chief of police, and maybe the board of zoning. So, you know, connecting my client who wants to do something up there, bringing on local counsel to be their local shepherd, um, not only makes good sense for, most of all, makes best sense for the client, which is the most important thing, but it also really helps build the rapport and network with other lawyers who I'm sure you know from your podcasting are a very hesitant, trepidatious bunch who are usually not that curious either, you
Yeah.
know.
No, I understand that 100%. Well, I'll tell you what, let me just jump right over and ask you our closing questions because I always like to get those in. My listeners look for those every time. I want to be as respectful as I can of your time. Um, I gave those in the pre-roll, so you've had a little bit of time to percolate on them. And usually, what I'll do, I'll let you think on them. I know you have them written down. We're gonna jump over really quickly and just take a look at your website. Again, I'm
Okay.
talking to Tyson Daniel, and he is the guy behind VirginiaCannabisLawyers.com. As always, we will have a link down below. You can fill out the contact us form on their website. You can give them a call as well. But if you are looking to start a business, particularly a cannabis business in the Virginia area, I think Tyson sounds like he knows the law and would be a wonderful asset to have at your disposal. And obviously, it sounds like the laws are changing, but also kind of not at the same time. They're in flux, but if you want to know what's going on, obviously having good counsel always makes sense. I do have one new sponsor today. I was going to read from really, really quickly because they are a brand new sponsor, and that is huntercustomers.com/growth. Would you spend 10 minutes to add $10,000 a month to your business every month? What most local businesses don't need is another random marketing tactic. What they need to know is where their money is leaking. And that's why hundreds of customers built a free $10,000 growth gap analysis. In about 10 minutes, they will review your business and show you what's holding you back: visibility, website, conversion, missed calls, follow up on reviews, tracking, or something else entirely. They'll map a realistic plan to help you earn an extra $100,000 or $10,000 a month up to $100,000 per month. And they will do it for free. In fact, you don't even have to talk to anybody. You just go to hunderdsofcustomers.com/growth and try it. They look at over 500 data points in order to help you grow your business, and they can help you find a path to an extra $10,000 to $100,000 per month, depending upon your industry. Obviously, there is no guarantee of income, et cetera, et cetera. But the tool is absolutely free. It's hundreds of customers, all spelled out.com/growth, and we'll have a link to them down below in the comms. All right, so I want to ask you really quickly my three questions. So question number one, Tyson, is this: if you could change one thing, if I gave you a magic wand and you could change one thing about your firm, what would you change?
Um, bandwidth. I would add more lawyers.
More lawyers?
I would hire more lawyers. Absolutely. Yep.
It's a good problem to have.
Bandwidth.
It means you're in a growth trajectory, and that's always a good thing to see.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, we just can't handle the volume of cases coming in now. So
gotcha,
anybody
gotcha. Well,
listening wants to get into cannabis space, whether research or looking for a gig, I'm really flex about terms and we pay well.
very cool. Very cool. So yeah, anyone fresh out of law school, feel free to reach out to Tyson. Speaking of fresh out of law school, question number two: if we go back in time and meet young Tyson, 25 years ago, give or take, fresh out of law school, and you're able to give yourself a little piece of advice other than the obvious: buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it to 100K. What advice would you give yourself and why?
Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bizarre answer here. Because when I was in law school, I had the contract to provide all the iced tea and lemonade for all the Richmond venues. So I was the dude humping iced tea and lemonade for every hockey game, the circus, for every event when everyone else was studying. My mother, who worked full time, and I brokered deals with bakeries around Richmond where we leased the ovens at night. He would make these confections that were just phenomenal. But most of all, we would bring them in fresh, and the smell of those would waft around, and it would bring people to our iced tea and lemonade stand, where we absolutely crushed it.
I mean, that worked for Cinnabon, right? That's what they do is they pipe out that cinnamon smell and it reels you in fresh baked bread, man. That's
Big time, big time. And so what happened is 2 days after I accepted the job at the public defender's office, Aramark offered me the contract for iced tea and lemonade at Camden Yards.
hmm,
I just got married, um, and I just accepted that job, 100 grand in debt. Um, and I went home. Oh, and by the way, Aramark said if you do that well, we'll also give you, this was in '99, what was then going to be the new Redskins Stadium, iced tea and lemonade, and the confections if you want to do it. And I came home and said to my wife, "Hey, what do you think about iced tea and lemonade at Camden Yards and maybe Redskins Stadium?" And she looked at me like I had five heads, and wanted to slap all five of them. And I knew the answer was no. So the first thing I would say is before you jump off to law school, if you have something else like that, give it some consideration. Because in hindsight, I can tell you that I wouldn't change my experiences as a lawyer, but I would be in a very, very different financial position had I taken the iced tea and lemonade contracts with Arizona. Um, and I think I would have had a lot more fun enjoying baseball and whatnot. Now, I don't know that I would have liked moving to Baltimore or DC. So, in fact, I'm certain I would not like it.
That's
So,
fair.
I guess that's one thing. The other thing is that law related. Um, as a young lawyer doing what I did, it was important because I learned not to be afraid of the court. I grew up with a dad who used to tell us, everyone puts their pants on the same way you do, and you know, doing some athletics, I was uh, never. I was two-time state wrestling champ, but never never went on to do anything significant in college or anything like that. I think that that's an important lesson for people to learn. When they learn it in athletics, they learn it in theater, they learn it in some other form of art. They learn it doing podcasts like you have, which is be confident in your presentations. It instills confidence and excitement and credibility in others with you, and so I'd say that's the other takeaway.
Okay, that's fair. I can't argue that. Well, we're at the end of the hour here. Let me ask you my last question, just because I'm really curious to see what you say about this, and it might even have to do with what you talked about the governor vetoing before. But if I gave you my magical pencil and you could change one law, that is strike a law from the books, add a law to the books, or edit a law that's on the books, national, local, big ramifications, or just getting rid of parking tickets, what would you change?
I would reconcile the definitions of marijuana uh, and hemp under both state and federal law. Um, I, I don't want to think of myself in terms of the veto. Your question, I think, is a much larger one, and it deserves a response that is not beneficial to me or just one group of people. I think that 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 having clarity on those issues and the way to do it is, in my opinion, is to have what's called a one plant, one rule doctrine, which means cannabis is one plant, marijuana and hemp really are legal fictions based largely on the genetics and the way that they're planted. And if we had a rule that just, it would be more than one probably, but that dictated that we will regulate the product for the purpose for which it is grown. And then we would be able to build the infrastructure in our nation in a way that would be unstoppable by getting away from petroleum-based products. And look, I don't have a hybrid car. I drive a gas car. So, I don't want to be a hypocrite about it. There's a place for petroleum, but hemp is the applications are limited only by creativity. And one other thing to note is it's the highest protein um, plant other than soy on in the world. I'd say ounce for ounce or pound for pound. So it's incredibly good for people. And eating the seeds themselves, the shells, is kind of like the old adage about eating a potato skin. All the good stuff's in the skin.
Yeah.
Same way with the shells. Um, so there are huge opportunities that most people aren't seeing that have nothing to do with the intoxicating side of cannabis.
Yeah. That's
So
fascinating. My father-in-law is a medical doctor who's been practicing for over 40 years, and he was pointing out, he says, I'm gonna biff these numbers. I'm gonna be careful how I even say it. He says people get addicted to opioids because there's like 1,000 receptors in the brain for opioids. But with cannabis, there's actually like 10,000 receptors. Like your brain is actually wired to receive cannabinoids, which is fascinating. And he says, it's why CBD oil as a treatment is actually growing because it really is solving problems for a lot of people. And I think it's a fascinating area. I wish we had time to dive into that. But again, I want to be respectful of your time. We're already over the point where we're over the point where we're over the
yeah.
point. So
Well, I just say this: the endocannabinoid system, to your point, was not something that I learned about in school.
yeah.
We
Oh, they
had
don't teach
five
it.
systems, not six. You
Yeah,
know, so
absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
thank you so
Well,
much, Justin. I've enjoyed the
yeah.
time. It's been my privilege.
Thank you very much for being on the podcast. This has been the Attorney Post. I've been chatting with Tyson Daniel. He runs VirginiaCannabisLawyers.com. If you are in the Virginia area, obviously, feel free to look him up if you're looking at starting a cannabis business. As always, this is the Attorney Post. We've been talking a lot of different legal aspects, etc. But of course, though we do talk about legal aspects, this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you find yourself in need of a legal issue, you should always talk to an attorney who is competent in the area that you are having an issue with. Obviously, I would recommend Tyson if you are looking to start a cannabis business
Thank you.
in Virginia. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, we appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any of the podcast repositories, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc., please feel free to rate us and review us there as well. But the most important thing you can do to help this podcast grow is if you know somebody who would benefit from the information we talked about today, maybe somebody looking to start a cannabis business, share this podcast with them so they can start to figure out what it is they need to know. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, this is Justin West. Thank you guys for listening, and bye
Thank
bye.
you.